Picture slaving away as a hardware engineer, living out your days with friends and family. But one day you pray for a more interesting life, only to have your wish granted as you're flung into a mysterious world filled with strange magic and dark entities. The anime opens with the power system in this world, where humans take potions to obtain one of 22 different power pathways and become Beyonders. Within each pathway are 9 stages of power called sequences, with 9 being the weakest and 1 being the closest to the level of a god. Following our MC, Klein Moretti, he awakens from what he believes to be a nightmare, but seeing a bloodied notebook and revolver in front of him, Klein begins to wonder where he is. As different memories from a different life flash through his mind, he suddenly senses a cold sensation brush by his shoulder, but when he turns to check, there is nothing there. Having been called Klein by the ghostly apparition, Klein checks his reflection, realizing that this isn't his body and that he has somehow transmigrated into a body with a bullet hole in his head. Elsewhere we follow 2 policemen stumble onto the corpses of Welch and Naya, people that graduated from the University of Koei, and from the state of the room, Dunsmith, the captain of the police, deduced that black divination had led them to take their own lives. Dunn wonders if a Beyonder was sacrificed to awaken an evil force. But having found a picture frame of Klein alongside Welch and Naya, Dunn begins to profile Klein. Apparently, Klein's parents are dead, and he lives with his sister within the Tianjin city of Awa County in the Lone Kingdom, north of the continent. With Klein being a fresh graduate of history, having studied ancient Fasak and Hermes, we follow Klein flicking through a notebook with records starting around May 29th, where Klein and his friends had apparently found an ancient notebook and begun deciphering it, with Dunn strangely able to deduce the discovered notebook to be from the 4th epoch, along with the writer of said notebook to be from the Antigonus family. We see Klein baffled by what he is reading. Words like the Black Emperor, the Tudor Kingdom, and Hornace Mountain Ranges stand out to Klein, but strangely an entry on the 27th of June is missing. Further in the notebook lies a bloodied hand along with a log that mentions the word Hermes along with a declaration that everyone will pass away, including Klein himself. Although freaked out, Klein suddenly hears a voice from the other room, quickly closing the notebook. Managing to cover up some blood stains, Melissa Moretti, Klein's younger sister and a Backlund University student, comes to check on Klein, having just woken up. As Melissa enters the room, Klein is seen concealing his revolver, secretly dropping it into one of his drawers. But when Melissa asks what Klein is hiding, he mentions that his stopwatch is broken. Annoyed, Melissa chooses to help Klein fix the stopwatch, but as she leaves, Klein confirms that the hole in his head is healing, wondering if the previous Klein's death was accidental or intentional. Klein says he can't retrieve all of the memories of his body, but he does know the ancient notebook has something to do with his transmigration, as he remembers his previous life quite clearly. Having lived a pretty modern life with family and friends, and his most recent memory was him wishing for better luck via a luck enhancement ritual, Klein is suddenly brought back to reality as Melissa hands him some bread, declaring that she needs to head to school, but remembers to remind Klein to purchase some bread, lamb, and peas. With Melissa promising to whip up something tasty for Klein tonight, she departs with a smile, but Klein fears he won't be home to greet Melissa. Suiting up and retrieving his revolver, Klein finds it weird that Melissa didn't hear the revolver go off if he took his own life. So as Klein heads to the bakery to pick up some fresh bread, he greets Mrs. Smyron. Smyron reassures Klein he'll get a job soon, but Klein suddenly detects a person spying on him, only to turn back to Smyron thanking her for the 8-pound bread. As Klein heads through Iron and Cross Street, Klein acknowledges that this world may be parallel to his old one, suddenly spotting some men playing the landlord game. Klein remembers that the landlord game was created 100 years ago in the Intis Emperor, where Rosel Gustav himself invented the game. Rosel had also invented tarot reading, created the steamship, and promoted the Spring Festival. But Klein suspects that such an innovative emperor like Rosel must have been a transmigrator as well. Having dropped a coin, Klein kneels down to pick it up, but seeing a shadow cast over him, Klein prepares to draw his revolver. Realizing it is only a clown handing out flyers, Klein calms down as the clown mentions how they'll be waiting for him at 7 tonight. But as Klein leaves the scene, he suddenly brushes past a strange man. Overwhelmed by the crowd around him, Klein sneaks into a hut to cool off, but is suddenly called to sit down by a fortune teller. Outside the hut, we see the man following him earlier approaching the hut, but a single glance from another man sends Jenkin away. With Klein more calm, he sits down to have his fortune read, managing to convince the lady to give a reading for free. The fortune teller asks what Klein wants to know, and without hesitating, Klein asks to know about his past, present, and future. As some tarot cards are shuffled, Klein is shown 3 cards to represent the answer to his questions, and with Klein asking to see his present first, Klein lays eyes on the Fool card. With an eerie silence filling the room, the duo suddenly notice a girl enter the hut, only to scold the fortune teller for impersonating her, as she is meant to be a beast tamer. At that moment, we see one of the strange men entering the hut as well. But luckily, Klein has already left the scene. At home, Klein creates 4 talismans representing the 4 corners of the luck enchantment ritual he believes brought him to this world. And as he stands in the center of the ritual, he begins to spin to acknowledge the celestial governing the ritual. Within a few seconds, a massive gust of wind sends the papers in his room flying, but Klein wonders why nothing is happening. Right on cue, his head begins to throb horrendously, suddenly collapsing as streaks of red paint his surrounding room. Crying out in pain, Klein is submerged in a mist-filled plain where various light orbs surround him, only for a red and blue orb to begin circling him. Elsewhere, we follow Audrey Hall call out to her mirror, all whilst in the middle of the ocean. Alger Wilson seems to be performing a similar ritual, both representing the red and blue orbs respectively, as they too are flung into the mist-filled world. Both Audrey and Alger ask to know why they're here, wondering if Klein is the one who summoned them to the divine world. In the blink of an eye, the mist-filled domain begins to transform into something more comprehensible, and with a wave of his hand, Klein realizes he can create and control the realm before them, suddenly erecting a table for the duo gathered. Alger speaks up, asking to know who Klein is, but Klein is conflicted as he utters that Zhoming Rue was his previous life's identity. Stealing his resolve, Klein takes a seat at the table, forcing both Audrey and Alger to join him. Klein introduces himself to be the Fool, deducing that Audrey will be easier to speak to than Alger, who seems on edge. But out of nowhere, Audrey cries that she always dreamt of becoming a Beyonder, asking Klein how she can become one. Klein realizes he doesn't know what Audrey is talking about, choosing to ask Alger to answer Audrey's question instead. Alger believes Audrey to be a lone noble. As for himself, Alger is from the faraway Sonia seas, curious as to how Klein brought them here. Alger utters that one must first join a church to become a Beyonder, but this is not something most people want, as Beyonders are tasked with fighting against dark forces. Audrey asks if there are other ways to become a Beyonder, something that rattles Alger as he admits he has 2 Sequence 9 potions, one called Sailor and the other the Audience. Klein has no idea what these potions are, interested to know if the Gray Fog and his transmigration are features of a Beyonder's skills. But suddenly Audrey declares she has made a pact with Alger, asking if Klein can stand witness to said pact. Alger admits he can sense great potential from Klein, offering to handle matters that Klein asks of them, something that prompts Klein to set up gatherings between the 3 of them every Monday at 3 p.m. in order to extract as much information from this world as he can. Suddenly, Klein begins to feel nauseous, along with hearing some knocking on his room. So before he departs, he assigns Audrey the codename Justice and Alger the codename of the Hangman. With Audrey fangirling over their new tarot card-themed club, Klein slowly begins to lose touch of his mist-filled world, ending the gathering as everyone is sent back to the real world. Answering the knocking, Klein hears that the police are at his doors, swiftly rushing to conceal his notebook and revolver only to peep out the keyhole. Greeting the policeman, Klein realizes Leonard Mitchell of Alwa County Police was the man stalking him earlier, but Leonard says he was simply protecting Klein. Klein is agitated, seeing, as Dunn is also here to perform a routine inspection, reporting to Klein that his friends had taken their own lives, and within a few seconds Leonard had managed to locate Klein's hidden notebook. Leonard smirks as he asks Klein to explain the logs in the notebook, and seeing as he has no way out, Klein collapses onto his bed, uttering that he can't remember anything. Dunn says there is evidence of Klein at Welsh's home, something that is news to Klein as well. But as Dunn takes out a smoking pipe, he takes a whiff from the pipe only to ask for the revolver Klein is hiding. As Klein points Leonard over to its hiding spot, Klein takes the chance to admit he had tried taking his life, but when he woke up, he was strangely alive. Dunn says he believes Klein, but Klein will still have to be interrogated by a psychic in hopes of Klein retrieving his memories. Leonard utters that Klein is quite lucky, as those who delve into such dark practices normally end up losing their lives. Escorted onto the streets, Klein fears his identity as a transmigrator will be uncovered. But out of nowhere, a petty thief turns the corner, having stolen some bread from a shopkeeper. Catching the attention of the policeman, Dunn helps capture the thief, but before the boy can return what he stole, he ends up causing a ruckus, buying time for Klein to flee the scene. Bumping into passersby and weaving through alleys, Klein manages to lose the police, but as he glances up into the sky, he spots some water being dumped onto him. Strangely, the water suddenly freezes in mid-air, something Klein recognizes to be some sort of time and space ability, freaking him out as a Beyonder is nearby. As the world around him begins to upheave and behave weirdly, Klein tries his best to flee, managing to squeeze past his obstacles and enter a carriage. Asking the driver to head to the port, Klein takes the chance to catch his breath, wondering if the situation has calmed down, but when Klein asks to be dropped off, he realizes that Dunn is the driver of the carriage. Suddenly waking up, Klein is confused at his surreal dream, but outside his door, Klein spots Dunn appear once more, making Klein wonder if Dunn can manipulate people's dreams. Before Klein can make a move, Dunn declares they're stronger during the night, prompting the space around Klein to morph once more as a strange lady appears behind Klein, asking him to remain calm as she sends Klein into a daze. Flung into a different realm, Klein notices his parents enshrouded by some gray fog, but before he can call out to them, the whispers of the strange lady alert Klein to stay focused. Klein realizes the lady probably can't see his parents due to the gray fog, but in that instance, the lady leaps onto Klein, demanding Klein explain where the ancient notebook is. Entranced, Klein says he has no clue, plus he has no idea what happened to Welsh and Naga. The lady asks what Klein was doing when his two friends were murdered, but with a single action, Klein shows he had taken his own life around the same time his friends did. Back in reality, Daily Simone says Klein is a tricky case as everything he says is true and he did shoot himself in the head but is alive somehow. Daly says Dunn should be careful with Klein, but seeing as the Antigonus notebook is still missing, Dunn says Klein is still in danger, asking if Klein wants to join them and become a Beyonder. The next day, we see Klein had been given a business card that instructs him to head to the Hound Pub and join the Nighthawks, an opportunity for Klein to learn more about this world. Upon entering the pub, Klein is thrown off seeing a crowd cheering as they watch a dog devour some rats. And to make things worse, a mini brawl starts up. With Klein clearly out of place, the bartender asks Klein to leave, but Klein mentions how he wants to hire some mercenaries. Annoyed, the bartender demands to know why Klein is here, but upon hearing that Dunn had asked him to come, the bartender guides Klein to a secret elevator. As the ride begins to move, it opens into a lavish-looking office deemed the Blackthorn Security Company headquarters, prompting Klein to greet the sleepy clerk, Roseanne Adelaide. When Klein introduces himself, Roseanne immediately shows Klein another secret passage, surprisingly watching as Leonard nonchalantly passes by. Descending a staircase, Roseanne mentions how they aren't so busy at the moment, passing by Royale Radine, someone Roseanne acknowledges is very pretty. Now moving through some corridors, our duo stop by Fry, who seems busy sketching up something. And as they make their way deeper along the passage, they walk by Kenley White, a member of the Nighthawks who joined 6 months ago. Stumbling onto a fork in their path, Roseanne instructs Klein to carry on alone, mentioning how the captain is waiting for Klein, plus Roseanne is quite scared of their captain. Following the lit path into a massive open room, Klein notices a towering pair of doors called the Chinese Gate in front of him. Off to the side, a smaller duty room opens to reveal Dunn, who greets Klein, Happy to see Klein has accepted his proposal. Given some papers to sign, Klein is assigned into the 7th unit of the police department, an alias for their organization, as they work under the Church of the Evernight Goddess. With a firm handshake welcoming Klein to the team, Dunn warns Klein that as a Nighthawk he may lose control, instructing Klein to pick up a candle and follow him. Entering into a candle-lit room, Dunn shows off the many souls that have been sacrificed to the Nighthawk, and the leading cause was them losing control. Dunn says the Fallen have carved a path for their predecessors, something Klein respects as he places his lit candle beside the others, only to be asked if he knows about the myth of creation. Klein recounts that the Creator made up all of existence, having created the sun and crimson moon using its eyes, leaving its body to make up the land and the stars. The Creator's hair turned into a phoenix, and its ears became demonic wolves. And interestingly enough, humans can make potions with mysticism ingredients to access power from the pathways. Klein recounts the Hanging Man, mentioning that the Church of Evernight Goddess has access to 4 different pathways, these being the complete sleepless pathway, the Corpse Collector, which is good for self-defense, the Mystery Prayer, and Seer, who dwells in mysticism, but suffers offensively. Dunn says he won't ask Klein to pick a certain pathway just yet, advising that Klein chat with Old Neil in the alchemy room to help with his decision. As Klein leaves Dunn's office, he reasons the Sleepless and Corpse Collector pathways are useless since he needs information on mysticism, and seeing as he can't decide between Mystery Prayer and Seer, Klein enters the alchemy room only to notice no one is present. Out of nowhere, a massive bang sends Old Neil flying into the room, and with Klein introducing himself, Old Neil asks Klein to help him tidy up some documents. As Klein sorts out some books, Old Neil is impressed to hear Klein studied ancient Fasek and Hermes during his history major in university, uttering that if Klein works hard, one day he can decipher the notebooks that went missing after Emperor Rosel's death. Klein is surprised Old Neil is in possession of 3 missing transcripts, revealing that there were strange symbols Rosel invented containing mysterious powers, and after 150 years of silence, Old Neil had managed to decipher some of the symbols. Showing his progress, Old Neil says the transcripts were a diary, but immediately Klein recognizes the symbols to be simplified Chinese. Reading over the transcript, Klein hears that Rosel Gustav thought of himself as the protagonist, recounting a time when he danced with Lady Florina, but Klein can't help but smile at Rosel's diary records. Suddenly, Klein notices Rosel's records mentioning how the potions and pathways aren't that important, and it's the user's ability to internalize the power that makes all the difference. To end the transcript, Rosel says he regrets his pathway as he should have chosen either the apprentice, the seer, or the marauder, throwing Klein off as he hears Rosel has made a grave mistake. Brought back to reality by Old Neil asks why Klein is daydreaming, but Klein apologizes, hiding the fact that he can read the transcript. With Old Neil asking if Klein has any idea what he'll be choosing as his pathway, Klein doesn't hesitate to trust Rosel's message, declaring that he'll choose the seer, something that intrigues Old Neil. Old Neil reminds Klein that he can't change his mind once he takes the potion, but Klein stands strong, making Old Neil smirk as he readies the potion. Fusing together some pure water, nightshade's extract, gold mint leaves, poison hemlock extract, dragon bloodgrass powder, and Lavo's squid crystallized blood, only to top it off with some stellar aqua crystals. With a mystical smoke cloud bursting from the potion, Old Neil presents Klein his potion, an item that makes Klein tense as he questions if it's edible. Seeing Klein hesitant, Old Neil tells Klein to relax, as his nerves will only disrupt the absorption process, and seeing as the solution to all his questions are in front of him, Klein gulps down the potion in one go. Immediately, the potion begins seeping into the very essence of Klein's being, causing Klein's heart to beat rapidly as he spots his vision acting strange. Old Neil says it's fine, asking Klein to focus and think of an object that exists to calm his mind. And when Klein thinks of Top Hat, he manages to calm down, only for Old Neil to ask Klein to think of an object that doesn't exist. Within a few seconds, the ground beneath Klein begins to rumble as a sudden burst of power causes the ceiling to rupture. horrifying old Neil as he instructs Klein to control his thoughts. In Klein's mind, he had pictured a missile, and as his imagination runs wild, Klein can't help but think of all the vehicles that exist in his previous world. Old Neil notices various potions in his laboratory suddenly spilling out, crying for Klein to control his powers, but Klein seems to have pictured a catastrophic explosion, barely able to quench his imagination as his eyes now seem to have been soaked in a dark hue. Immediately, Klein sees everything differently, a feature of the seer as he has spirit vision, where he has the ability to read people's auras and tell their health condition. Klein is sad to see old Neil's health isn't as good as he thought, suddenly flinching as he notices some eyes behind old Neil. Something old Neil utters is just some magic from a ritual he performed. Glancing around the room, Klein notices a figure evaporate, but old Neil asks that Klein not exhaust his spirituality with his spirit vision, revealing that when Leonard had first become a Beyonder, he tripped down some stairs after taking his potion. Old Neil shows off a tip to turn off the spirit vision, asking Klein to tap his forehead twice to deactivate his ability. Plus, Klein can use his spirituality on divination arts like the dowsing rod along with performing other rituals. Before Klein leaves, old Neil hands Klein his demon hunting gear along with some receipts, something old Neil says Dunn will reimburse him for. Reporting to Dunn, Klein is flattered hearing Dunn compliment his quick adaptation to his seer abilities, but Dunn warns Klein not to pry into things he doesn't understand as it may cost his life. With Klein heeding Dunn's warning, he hears he'll work as a clerk before he becomes an official member of the Nighthawks, and with a payment of £3 a week. Klein ecstatically accepts his £12 payment early, especially since his big brother Benson earns £5 to £6 a week. As a daily task, Klein is asked to purchase a cane and walk around Welch's home in hopes of him remembering anything about the missing notebook, but suddenly a carriage pulls up beside him only for Leonard to ask Klein to get in. As rain descends onto the town, we see Klein given an assignment and briefed on Elliot, the son of a tobacco merchant, Viceroy. Klein is surprised Beyonders take on kidnapping cases, but Leonard says Viceroy was their previous client as they had found Viceroy's lost cat in the past. Seeing as Klein's seer role is perfect for locating things, Leonard hands Klein some of Elliot's belongings, only for Klein to make use of his cane, using it as a dowsing rod as he activates his spirit vision. In the blink of an eye, the space around Klein becomes masked in different hues, and having filtered out all the unnecessary information, Klein manages to locate Elliot's position, asking the carriage driver to continue straight. Within a few minutes, Klein and his dowsing rod have led them to Forston Street, and upon heading into a nearby building and up some stairs, Klein points Leonard to a room where Elliot is being held captive. Klein declares that there are 2 kidnappers inside the room with Elliot, and seeing as it's Leonard's time to take over, he begins by dismantling the door standing in their way. Spotting the intruders, the kidnappers toss their table at Leonard, buying enough time to whip out a gun and fire a round at Leonard, but sadly it misses. As Leonard closes the distance, he manages to destroy the attacker's gun, only to pummel one of the men. As the other charges him, Leonard manages to parry and block each of the man's attacks with a single hand, noticing the man has bloodshot eyes, but regardless, Leonard sends the man flying as well. Having wrapped up things, Klein reassures Elliot that everything is fine now, but out of nowhere a faint feather descends onto the men's bodies, suddenly popping as the unconscious men begin to rise up. With Klein taking Elliot to safety, Leonard stays behind and watches as the men's bodies begin to morph and fuse into a demonic creature. Seeing the creature dive towards him, Leonard ducks and weaves, occasionally landing several monstrous blows that knock the creature back, and with the creature clearly too weak to fight back, Leonard puts it down with a single wave of his palm. Strangely, the remnants of the creature escapes from Leonard and slips by Klein, prompting Klein to raise his revolver in its direction, only to use his cane to help him locate the creature's presence. Out of nowhere, the creature appears from the walls beside Klein, and having been overrun with fear, Klein blindly takes aim and fires. Luckily, Klein's shot sends the creature flying into the skies to further escape. But Leonard has the situation under control, having dragged the creature into his crimson domain. slowly watching as the creature is bound and torn apart. Leonard reassures Klein that his abilities have put the creature to rest, but suddenly Klein begins to remember memories of Klein's body being in this building before, hiding such a revelation for now. With Elliot reuniting with his father, Leonard compliments Klein's shot, ordering Klein to stay away from the creature's corpse as it may contaminate him. Leonard wonders where the men got their potions from, annoyed seeing as they faced another uncontrollable beyonder, pointing out how lucky Klein is to have run into one on his first mission. As Leonard celebrates a job well done with a high five, he manages to weird Klein out with some compliments. But as Klein leaves the scene, Leonard strangely hears from a shadow that Klein is nothing special. At home, Klein can't wait to tell Melissa he got a good-paying job, but upon entering his home, Klein is freaked out to see he is back in the building on Forston Street. Being drawn to a door in particular, Klein heads through the door only to be greeted by a disheveled-looking room with a lone notebook being put on display. Glancing at the notebook, Klein is frightened to see the book declare everyone will perish, only for its pages to suddenly dissolve as Klein is slowly consumed by the Fool card. Waking up from his dream, Klein realizes the house across from the kidnapping place has intel on the lost Antigonus notebook. Moving forward in time, we see Benson heading to visit Klein and Melissa's new home, proud that the three of them will be living in such a lavish home. Sitting down for a homely meal, Melissa can't help but praise Klein's cooking, and with Benson handing Klein a gift to celebrate Klein's new job, Klein tries on the gift only to thank Melissa and Benson for always supporting him. As Benson pats Klein on the head, Klein is reminded of his parents, all three continuing their celebration as it's the start of their new life. In the Blackhorn security campus, we see Dunn and Leonard interrogating a man that was found to have been tailing Klein, and with Dunn's pathway, he is able to see the man exchanging the Antigonus family notebook for some cash. Leonard declares that the secret order is involved somehow, and seeing as they must retrieve the notebook before the secret order does, our duo suddenly hear that Klein has got a lead on the notebook's location. With Klein showing Dunn and Leonard the room in his dreams, Klein is disgusted to see a rotting corpse, and with the son of the deceased man, Ray Bieber, being their best lead, the gang call on Klein to track down Ray. Making use of his cane, Klein attempts to locate his target, but his wand begins to act sporadically, suddenly diving towards Klein himself, forcing Dunn to step in and stop the ritual. Seeing as there is some interference, Dunn says he'll report their findings to the Holy Cathedral, and within a few days Klein is seen waiting outside the Chinese gates. Dunn compliments Klein's dapper outfit, handing him a topaz pendulum that will help with divinations, plus the Holy Cathedral has authorized the use of Grade 2 artifacts to help with locating Ray. Dunn says the Grade 2 items they'll be using are being delivered to them as they speak, powerful items that are sealed behind Chinese gates. And the Grade 2 implies that such an item is very dangerous. Right on cue, three figures are seen meeting up with Dunn, introducing themselves as Ire Harson, a Sequence 7 Nightmare user, and Borja, a Sequence 8 Gravedigger. Finally is Daly, the Sequence 7 Spirit Medium, but the men question if a seer will be safe with them. Dunn sees that the approved artifact is 2-049, all moving into Dunn's office where he fears such a powerful artifact may not be necessary. But Ire says Ray may be a descendant of the Antigonus family, so they'll use everything they can to hunt him down. With Ire reminding everyone to stay alert, Ire along with the others begins to flex and stretch their arms, peer pressuring Klein to join in, but suddenly the artifact box begins to open. Stepping out is a miniature clown doll, but as Klein adores the little creature, its face morphs into a horrifying monster, freezing Klein in place. Unable to move, the doll wraps several strings around Klein's neck ready to take his life, but luckily Leonard severs the strings, surprising everyone as the doll is reacting to the person with the closest connection to the Antigonus notebook. Klein notices his vision slowing down temporarily, only to hear that the doll is capable of entrancing and controlling any one human target at a time. But a strong slap will set the mind-controlled human free, hence why they're performing the strange arm stretch to identify if anyone is under the doll's control. As the doll continues to chase after Klein, Leonard reveals Ray's code, an item that pisses off the clown as it lunges towards the coat, only for Ire to reseal the doll, confirming that Ray is a descendant of the Antigonus family. Heading out, we see our group continue their stretching maneuvers as they head towards their carriages, boarding the carriage as they head towards a certain location. Elsewhere in a factory, we see a disturbing scene where Ray has been placed in the center of a ritual and has been forced to absorb a notebook, taking on a demonic form. In the shadows, a clown-looking man is annoyed he was too late, but upon detecting some carriages approaching, he gets excited, seeing as there may be hope. With Klein and the gang arriving at the factory location, Klein is tasked with using the pendulum to locate Ray, but as soon as Klein starts his ritual, some bloodied mist creeps out from one of the factories, scaring off the gang's horse carriages. As the surrounding landscape begins to vibrate, the gang draw their weapons, all watching as a demonic-looking Ray appears, locking onto the doll artifact. In the blink of an eye, Ray charges towards the doll box, but Dunn and the others get to work, asking that Klein stay back, dragging Ray into their domain. Leonard is seen binding Ray with his vines, only for Daly to begin submerging Ray in her water domain. But strangely, Ray erupts with power, completely shattering the Beyonder's domains as its aura overwrites the environment. Dunn realizes that Ray isn't a Beyonder gone berserk, as he fears they're facing a dead soul, all helplessly watching as Ray continues to barrow towards the doll box. But luckily, Dunn leaps onto him, temporarily putting him to sleep. Daly gets to work locating Ray's weakness, especially since Dunn suspects that Ray is under the notebook's control. But when Ray wakes up, Daly cries that she needs a few seconds to complete her search. Seeing as they'll need to bind Ray down, Dunn begins to chant, all whilst Leonard rushes in close, dancing circles around Ray only to erect a net that binds Ray in place. Before Dunn can finish his chant, Ray's core begins to act strangely, suddenly erupting with power as a bright flash of light distracts Dunn long enough for Ray to skewer Dunn with one of his tentacles, along with blowing Leonard back. Locking back onto the doll box, Ire is forced to hold off Ray's tentacles, but some of the stray tentacles knock the doll box back. As Borja continues to look after the box, Ire ignites his blade only to rush towards Ray's core, but sadly Ire's blade shatters upon impact with Ray's thick exterior. With a terrifying roar, Ire is sent flying as well, forcing Borja to rush to Ire's side. Still conscious, Dunn finishes his enchantment, working in tandem with Klein, who makes use of some night slumber charms to put Ray to sleep, allowing Daly to rush in and attack Ray's weak points. As Daly shreds Ray's body, Ray suddenly implodes, letting out a massive explosion that catches Daly in the impact zone. In the aftermath, Dunn rushes to feed Daly some medicine, but Klein seems strangely drawn to the Antigonus notebook, suddenly reminded of the words Hornicus and Phlegria. At that moment, the clown man from earlier makes his move, rushing towards Klein, but Dunn fires at the clown, realizing it was an illusion. With everyone now on high alert, they surround and protect the notebook, but Klein recognizes the clown to be the same man handing out flyers prior. With every successful shot, the gang end up slaying various illusions, noting how the clown man must be a Beyonder with a sequence of 7 or greater. Ire orders Borja to protect the doll box once more, but as Ire begins dueling the clown with his blade, the clown easily evades each strike. When Leonard joins the battle, the clown easily outclasses Leonard, scaring Leonard away with a well-timed explosion from his face, leaping into the air only to bombard Dunn with bullets of his own. Klein wonders if the clown can see the attacks in advance, testing out his theory as he fires off a stray bullet into the open, only to randomly land a hit on the clown's stomach. Pissed, the clown transfers the bullet wound into his arm, only to unveil a whip that keeps Leonard, Dunn, and Ire busy. Seeing an opening, the clown rushes towards Klein, forcing the men to protect Klein, but realizing they've been tricked, they all turn to see the clown besides the doll box. Pushing aside Borja, the clown lets the doll free, terrifying the boys as they feel a cold sensation run down their spines, all frozen in place as the doll has somehow latched onto all of them. Racking his brain for a solution to break free, Klein suddenly remembers his gray fog, swiftly chanting his luck enhancement ritual, only to successfully enter into his fog-filled domain. Klein wonders if the notebook is enhancing the doll's powers somehow, suddenly coming up with a safety measure to protect himself from the doll's mind control as Klein uses the amulet to perform some divination, returning to the physical world having protected his mind. Out of nowhere, the clown man offers to free Klein's colleagues in exchange for the notebook, and to make the deal more enticing, the clown man utters that he too was a former seer. Klein wonders if this is a trick or not, getting confused when the clown man mistakes Klein to be a sequence 8 seer instead of 9, wondering if his fog is interfering with the clown's judgment. The clown man says the other men are currently asleep, but we notice that Leonard and his shadow are secretly listening in on their conversation. Forcing Klein to make a choice, the clown man tells Klein the corresponding sequence 8 of the seer, something that shocks Klein, but when the clown man erects a skewer to taunt Klein, Klein suddenly grabs a hold of it, pulling the clown man into the puppet's domain. The clown man begins to freeze, seeing as the puppet is beginning to take over his body, demanding to know how Klein is able to move, but sadly Klein puts the clown down with several bullets. Klein sees that the clown belongs to the secret order, turning to help the others, but out of nowhere the clown man springs back to life, crying the word Hornaces only to finally fall over once more. With the doll sealed, we see everyone reflecting after the battle, only for Leonard to utter that he didn't need to save Klein, as he was impressed to see Klein drag the clown man into the doll's domain. Leonard whispers that himself and Klein are special individuals. Cutting back to headquarters, where Dunn submits the notebook to be verified by the Holy Cathedral, apologizing since Klein will have to wait a bit before he can view it. Dunn seems to be coughing quite a lot, praising Klein for a job well done today, but Klein wonders why Ray was in such a rush to absorb the notebook. Dunn says people who seek power don't act rashly, and upon seeing Klein freaked out seeing the clown man's corpse, Dunn says Klein did the right thing and slayed someone to save others. Suddenly remembering something, Klein reveals that the correspondence for a sequence 8 seer is a clown, cutting outside, where Dunn says they'll take care of Daly until she recovers. Before Ayer and Borja leave, they praise Klein for taking down a sequence 7 Beyonder when he was only a sequence 9, something that creates suspicion as Ayer wonders how Klein did it. Leonard helps cover for Klein, suggesting that since Klein was holding the notebook, he was able to negate the doll's mind control and in turn win. As Ayer and Borja depart, Klein suddenly feels his potion digesting, wondering if he can take the clown potion next, plus he still needs to figure out what this Hornaces is. Choosing to visit Koei University, Klein meets up with one of his old professors, Professor Azik, only to ask about his knowledge on the Antigonus notebook along with the nation of the Evernight in the Hornaces mountain range. Azik says his memory is quite foggy, promising to write to Klein if anything comes up, but before Klein leaves, Azik warns Klein to be wary of what he does moving forward. Now, all alone, Azik begins to act strange, suddenly unveiling a skeleton that had been hiding in his shadow.